Hi, everyone. I hope all are doing well and staying safe and healthy. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us for Fisdap tips and tricks. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone that due to the volume of attendees, all lines have been muted. If you have any questions, please feel free to send them through the chat and we'll save some time to address them at the end of the webinar. Today's tips and tricks topic is scheduler settings. Our host is Ben Tape, a solutions consultant with Fisdap. So without further delay, I'll pass it off to you, Ben.
Thanks, Haley, and good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. As mentioned, today we're going to be talking about the scheduler settings. So to start off with, we are going to be logging into Fisdap, which I got my screen on the Fisdap side. There we go. So we'll, as always, come to the dashboard when you get logged in. And most of what we're going to be working with today is going to be under two tabs. One, the scheduler itself, so that's under the shifts tab. And then the site setup and the scheduler settings can be accessed from the account page. The scheduler settings can also be accessed from the schedule, which we'll look at in just a few moments. But for now, we're going to start with the account page. So once you're here, the first thing you'll probably want to do is actually get your sites created or added if you've not already done so. So on the account page, you'll scroll just a little bit down, and under the program settings section, you'll see there's an option called sites. So go ahead and select that. Now with sites, first when you select it, you'll see your list of sites already. This program has a couple of lab shifts, 3 field shifts, and then 1 clinical shift. If you're not familiar, we do both use an icon for each of those shift types as well as color code them. So for labs, if you ever see this little orange beaker, or if you just see orange text regarding shifts in general, that's going to be a lab shift. If you see the blue ambulance, or just again blue for text regarding a shift, that's going to be field. And then the green hospital or green text, that's going to be for a clinical. So we'll see this in the scheduler, we'll see it in the skills tracker. It's just a nice way to know what you're looking at, specifically clinical, field, or lab, especially if you have a site that has both a, say, clinical and field presence. They may have very similar names, so the color coding will help distinguish which one you're looking at or working with. So as I mentioned, this is what we have in the system already. When a new program is created, we provide one site, typically it's a lab site, that will give the program something to work with right away, but typically programs are going to want more than that. So the first step when you want to add a new site is to go ahead and click on the Add Site button. And it's going to take a second to load, because what it's actually doing is loading all of the sites that have been created in your in Fisdap by other programs that are in your state. Now you can switch states because there are plenty of programs that work near borders and have students that go across to do work. So you can definitely do out-of-state ones, but by default it's going to pull whatever state your program's located in, and then it's going to pull all of the sites that, as I mentioned, other programs have created. So oftentimes you'll want to look through this list when you are trying to add a new site to see if what you want to add has been created. Now, obviously, you can just scroll through. There's a lot, so that might take a little bit. You can filter it down by the shift type, so you could look at only field, only clinical, only lab, but probably the most helpful is going to be doing a search by either the typically name's going to be easiest, but you can also do by city, address, or the contact. So if we were looking for a Fisdap site, we could type Fisdap in, and now we see all of the Fisdap sites that have been created by users in Fisdap. Again, that have Fisdap in the label. If we were to look for Duluth, we would see ones that are both in Duluth, but also that have Duluth in the name. So it's grabbing both of those options. So again, if you're not entirely sure what you need to look for, you can use some, the location, or you can use more vague language that hopefully will be picked up by something in there to try and find the one you're looking for. But say you go through all this and, or sorry, just to finish the loop on that, if you did find one you wanted to add, like if we wanted to add Essential Health Brainerd, we would just select it and then click the add site, and it would add it to our list, to our program rather. If you go through this whole list and you don't see the site that you are looking for, what you can do is go to New Site. And this will create a brand new site for your program, but also, again, it'll put it in that list of state programs so that other users could potentially use it. And we'll talk about why that's important in just a moment, but really quickly, we'll go ahead and make a new one. We'll just call it Fisdap webinar site. We'll give it an abbreviation of that, and we'll make this one a clinical site. And you don't need an address, but we do have a map it feature. So students in their skills tracker, when they pull up this shift, either in the full site or in the mobile app, there is a button that says map it. And if the address is in there, then it will actually pull up, either it uses Google Maps if they're in a browser, or it'll pull up the phone's map app if they're in the mobile app, and it'll actually go directly to where the location is listed. So I'm going to just quickly put in the Fisdap office, and we are in Minneapolis, and our zip code. There we go. And then we could also add a contact info for the person. So I'll just quickly put in me, and we don't need to worry about any of that other stuff. So I'll go ahead and hit save. And then what it's going to do is actually bring us directly into this site. Now, a couple things. First, it has the site name, the abbreviation, the location, and my contact info, or rather my name. I didn't put in my contact info, but say you realized, oh, we didn't put an email or anything. We want to make sure people who use the site can know who to contact. We can throw in my email. We could put in a phone number. That's the support line for Fisdap. And then we can go ahead and hit save. And then you'll see that once we do that, now that's listed. So this is not something necessarily that students will see, but other instructors who add this site will see that. So if there's ever an issue with it, they know who to contact to say, okay, well, Ben's the administrator for this site. Let's reach out to him to see what's going on. So the other thing up here is you can inactivate a site. Now, what that does is, and as this message is saying, it's going to turn it off for all new shifts. So it won't be displayed in the calendar. You won't be able to schedule shifts there. You won't be able to run reports on that site. But if the students have those shifts already in their shift list, if they've been assigned to them, or if they've signed up for them, then they will still have it. So they can still fill out the information on it. But again, if you go to run a report, the report's not going to be able to pull the information because the site is currently inactive. So we definitely want to make it active, assuming we are using it. And then one thing that is slightly different with adding clinical sites versus adding field or lab is that field and lab will be totally blank in the department or base section. You'll need to add your department or base and name it whatever you like. Again, for fields, oftentimes I see like rig 1, rig 2, rig 3, things like that. But you can name it whatever you want. And it's possible you only have one base or department within your lab or field site, or even clinical, in which case you would just add the one. However, with clinical, because oftentimes we know they're at hospitals where there are a lot of commonality in the different departments, we have added what we call the standard departments. So as you can see, anesthesia, burn unit, big things like ER, ICU, OR, pediatrics, all that kind of stuff. So things that we typically see a lot in the same or repeated in different hospitals that will use this. So we just wanted to make it easy so you didn't have to keep repeating this. And so if you are sending your students to the ER, the standard department's there, you just activate ER, and now they'll be able to go to the ER. So it's just a way to save you guys having to make a bunch of bases when you would probably already be using them in the clinical or field, or sorry, in clinical specifically. So we do need to have at least one base on in order to use the site, which this is letting us know. So we'll go ahead and throw in ER and ICU and OR. And I didn't actually mean to open that up, but that's actually a good thing I did, because you'll notice if you do open up a base, there's no address has been entered for this base. So right now, that's okay. If the student were to use the map it feature, it's going to use the site's options. It's going to use the site's address. However, typically at a hospital, the departments will be within the location, but it is possible that it may be off-site, or there may be if it's a clinical or lab or field site, that the base is also not where the main station is. So if you add a specific address for the base or department, it will actually use that for the map it feature. And so if they go to click map it, it'll take them directly to the base that they're assigned to, not just the site itself. And that's true as well if we needed to add a new department. we could click this, and then we can add a new one. Again, just we could call it whatever we want, site 1. And then right now we're going to give it the same address, but we could give it a different one if we want to. And again, the map it feature would go there. So as you can see, it's there. It's on by default. And if I needed to merge it with another one, I could select it and merge it. Now, the standard departments cannot be affected that way. You can change their address and things like that, but you can't merge or remove them in any way. So if you ever add multiple that you don't need, you can merge them in. So for example, if I just quickly make a site 2, and we realize, we actually don't need that site 2, what we can do is select both of them and then do a merge, and then I want to keep the site 1, and then it will merge the 2 together, and now it's effectively removed that one. So again, the standard departments can't be fully removed, but any you add in can be, and that's true on clinical, lab, and field. The other quick things I want to point out here are the preceptors. You can fill out your list of preceptors here by adding new preceptors. Again, if you add any that you don't need, you can do a merge on them. The students will also be able to add preceptors when they actually go into their shift. There is a section on the PCR that asks who the preceptor was, and it uses this list for the dropdown. But there's also an add a new preceptor button just in case they're working with someone who's not already in the list. So if students do add more when they should have looked in the list and seen them, and you get a bunch of duplicates, again, no problem. You would just come back here, select the duplicates, and then merge them into one, and that would take right care of it. The last bit I want to touch on in here is sharing network, and we're not going to spend a ton of time on shared network. We've done tips and tricks specifically on it, which you'll find in our list on the go.fisdap.net/tips and tricks. But just to point out, this is where the sharing is. We could request sharing, and then that would allow us to be moved over into the sharing, and then any other programs that then use this site would also be able to request sharing. And once everyone is sharing, then you're looking at the same shifts. So if I have a student that signs up for it on my end, and Haley had a student on her end, and we're sharing, they would see that if my student signed up, they would see if that shift was taken. So it just eliminates the possibility of duplicates if more than one program are sending students to the same site. So I mentioned when we were looking at that list of all the sites created by former programs when we were adding a site, the reason why you want to make sure to double check that list first before you just go and make a brand new site is that if you are using a site that others are using and you want to set up a shared network, you have to use the exact same site. So the same name won't work if you create two different sites that happen to have the same name. That's not going to see each other because what the system is reading is a site ID. And so the system basically has the computer has a code that it looks for to know if it's using it. So one thing that can help is there is a sharing column as you go to look for it. So if you see this icon, there is a shared network there. So if someone says, hey, we want you to join our shared network, you can look for the one that has that option and you'll be all set. But again, sometimes I'm not necessarily seeing. Oh, here's a good example. So Avera Marshall Medical Center, Avera Marshall Regional Medical Center, and Avera Marshall, Minnesota. All three of these clinical sites are likely the same one, but because people didn't double check the list and didn't add what was already in there, we now have 3 duplicates. So again, it's not the end of the world if you're not worrying about sharing. If you are worried about sharing, you definitely want to make sure you grab the same one. So now that we've got some sites, we can actually get into the settings option. So we'll go back to the account page, and we'll go to, not sites rather, but the scheduler. And there's not a ton of settings in here, but I do like to go through this before going and making the schedule itself, because there are some things in here that are about setting the default for creation. So if you know the way you want your schedule to be created, it's very helpful to set it up in the scheduler ahead of time so that it'll save you a bunch of clicks later on. So first off, letting students view each other's schedules. As by default, the students will not see each other's schedules, so they will only see shifts that are available to them and their own shifts. If you turn that on, they will see shifts available to them, their own shifts, and then also other students in your program. So this is a nice feature if you like to be able to let students swap shifts, because then they can see, oh, I took the shift that I don't need, but then another student has one that I want, and that way they can know and they can offer a swap to each other. Totally up to you guys if you want to use it or not. Again, by default it is off, but if you want to turn it on, that's where that is. This is not what the default is. Let me quickly show you what the default looks like. So a brand new program will have their settings look like this. So students cannot create field or clinical shifts, but they can create their own lab shifts. And then students cannot sign up for lab, clinical, or field. So most programs will probably want to make a change on that, because in this moment, essentially, students would only have access to lab shifts, or they would have to be assigned to their students, or the shifts rather would have to be assigned to the students by an instructor. So before we dig right into this, I like to talk about the different ways that you can basically set up your schedule. And I tend to refer to it as a bit of a like spectrum of authority. How much authority do you want to have as an instructor, and how much authority do you want to give, or responsibility do you want to give to your students? So on the peer instructor authoritative side of things, you could turn everything off. Students can't create their own shifts. They can't sign up for their own shifts. Essentially, as an instructor, you would be creating the shifts, and then you would be assigning the students to the shifts. Now, this has some benefits in that there is never any worries of them signing up for the wrong shifts, or signing up for too many shifts, or signing up in places where they shouldn't, because you're the one in control of it. You are assigning everything. An obvious downside is because you're doing everything, it's a lot of work. You need to both set up the schedule, but also make sure you know when the students have time and can do all that stuff. So you're doing a lot of managing of time. So perfectly good option, but you may not want to go that route of the pure authoritarian side. On the complete other end of the spectrum, you could turn the creation option on for students, and basically you could let students create their own shifts. They can work with the sites, they can figure out the times that works for them, and then they make the shifts, and then they go on them and start filling them out. This obviously frees up a lot of your time because they're handling the schedule, but you are also giving them a lot of responsibility and allowing them to create sites, and there's definitely a trust aspect that they are actually working with the sites and not setting things up improperly. So again, pros and cons with that one. Where I see most programs doing their setup is actually in the balance, where they don't let students create their own sites, but they do let them sign up. So in this situation, what will happen is the program will create all the available shifts. So instead of saying specifically, you're going here, you're going here, you're going here at these specific times, you might say, okay, at our Fisdap webinar site, there's 4-hour shifts every 4 hours, and that meets every day. So you would set that up in the scheduler, which we'll go over in just a moment, and then allow the students to come in and sign up with what works for them. And again, I find, and I think a lot of our programs find, it's a good balance, because you don't have to worry about knowing everyone's schedule. You just set up what's available to them. So it's a little bit less work for you. But because you're the one setting what's available to the students, you can guarantee that there's no they're not going to sign up for something that they absolutely shouldn't be able to sign up for, because of they're set up for what you have allowed. So again, you'll figure out what works best for you. I'm going to leave it as the can't sign up, or can't create but can sign up options. This is again on by default of letting them know when they are assigned or removed to a shift. Then you've got the manage sites option. So that's just bring you right back to where we were when we were adding sites. And then the manage requirements. So this is compliance. I believe Kurt talked about compliance in one of our more recent tips and tricks, which again, if you go back to our go.fisdap.net/tips and tricks, you'll be able to find that one. So we're not going to dig into requirements now, but there is a compliance webinar where we dig deep into that. And then the last section here is, and this is where I mentioned the default and why you want to get this set up ahead of time. This is not going to change if you change settings here, it's not going to change what is already in your program, any shifts that have already been scheduled, but it will change it for when we go to make new shifts. So first, you've got your drop, cover, swap options. Drop is just what it is. A student has a shift, they want to drop it. If we turn that to can, there's a drop button, and they click it, and they no longer have that shift. Cover would be if student A can't make the shift and student B can. Student B would gain the shift and student A would lose it. So again, it's essentially a transfer of a shift from one to another. And then swap is similar to cover, but instead of just one person covering it, the student A and B actually trade shifts. So as I mentioned, that's if you are going to use swap, you may want to let students see each other's schedule so that they can have a better idea of what they're actually trading for with their fellow students. And then with all these options, we also have with and without permission. So without, they just have a button, they click it, it's done. With permission means if they wanted to drop the shift, they would, instead of clicking just the drop button, there's a request change button, and they would click that, and then it would basically send a notification to the instructor, and it's also a section of the scheduler, which we'll point out in just a moment. And that would then allow the instructor to either approve or deny that requested drop, or if you did cover and swap as well, it would have those options. So it's, again, a nice balance where you're giving students the freedom to be able to, say they want to drop a shift, but you're ultimately the one saying whether or not that can happen. Now, regardless of the drop cover swap options, you as an instructor can always remove a student from a shift. So if you do have them turned off, but someone does have, extenuating circumstances that means they can't make a shift, you can always remove them from it. That's not a problem. But essentially, these options are letting the students do it themselves, or at least set up the request themselves without having to go through, email or something like that. And then finally, the sign up window. So first, if you turn off sign up for a shift type, there is no sign up window options because they can't sign up. And the sign up window is all about telling the students when they can sign up. But let's leave it to can. So with the sign up window, you're determining when the students can start signing up for it and when the sign up for that shift closes. By default, and I've actually again changed it, but by default, it is the start time is the day the program was created, and the until time is a week before the shift starts. So you can change basically everything about this. So we have, if you click the until or from button, there's a specific date option, which is like what the from is right now, a monthly date option, which would mean that in this instance it would close on the 15th of the previous month. So if we were creating a shift for April, it would already be closed because it closed on the 15th of March. If we are creating a shift for May and we set it to the 15th, it would already be closed because it closed on the 15th of April. If we set this to the 30th of the previous month, however, the students could still sign up for May because we haven't quite hit the 30th of April. And then the last option is the rolling, which is you basically it's setting up the opening and closing based on the shift date itself. So in this case, it's a week before the shift starts. So if we're setting shifts up for May 15, that's more than 2 weeks away, they would be able to sign up. But if we were creating shifts for this Saturday, that's less than a week out, those shifts would already be closed, so the students wouldn't have access to it. So again, if you know that all your field shifts or all your clinical shifts or all your lab shifts are all going to have the same sign-up window, you'll want to come in here and set up what that sign-up window is to save you clicks every time you go to create the shifts. And with that in mind, let's go ahead and quickly jump into what that looks like to create a shift. Oh, this is a good point. I did not save. So make sure to hit the save at the bottom. And again, if you do try and leave without saving, the notification will say, hey, you didn't save. Go ahead and do that. So, not skills and patient care, we want to go to scheduler. So once we open the schedule, you can change your view, although I tend to like the month details view. You see the month as a whole, and you can basically see everything about the shift. We know the start time, the duration, where it is, what the base is, and in this case, a student has already signed up for it, and we can see that student's name. In this shift over here, there are 2 slots. One the student has signed up, and the other one is available. But as you can see, there's a line going through them, which means it's actually invisible to the students because students only ever see shifts they're able to sign up for, and right now they're not able to sign up for it because the sign up window closed on April 19th. So that one is not available to those. But if we went to May, we would see that these shifts are all available to students, so they can sign up for it. They would click it. And again, when I mentioned that you as an instructor can always assign or drop a student, there's an assign drop button here that will let you do that. So let's go ahead and quickly make some shifts. We'll click on clinical. The process of clinical field and lab creation is identical, so I'm just going to show you clinical. Just know the only difference is that the the site options. So we only are going to look at the 2 clinical sites I have as opposed to all the sites. So we'll go ahead and use that Fisdap webinar site. We could give it a custom shift name if we wanted to, but it's not required. We can select a department. We'll go ahead and keep it as ER. Start time is going to be in 24-hour duration. You can make whatever you want. You can even do decimals if they're like at an 8.5-hour shift, and number of students who can go. So again, I just mentioned that students can only see shifts they can sign up for. So if you set to one student, one slot, and someone signs up, that slot's taken, and the shift will not be visible to any other student, unless you do turn on that option to let students see each other's schedule, in which case they would still see it, but they would also see that it is full and they can't sign up for it. And then the last step is just to actually click which shifts what days we want to select it. So if we were doing just one, we could select, Friday the 1st, and that'd be it. We can create one shift. We've got everything we need. But more often than not, you're going to be creating more than one shift at a time. And so what you can do is actually click on multiple days. And again, you could do this if you were making it for a month. You could click it for, all 30 days and it'd be fine, but a little bit tedious. So to make it easy, if there's a pattern, and I'm going to clear the selections, if there is a pattern to the shifts you're creating, we have this repeating option. So I'm going to click on the first, and I'm going to click repeating. And it's always going to go to the minimal repeatable amount of a pattern it can do. That was a poor way of saying basically when you only select one day, the most it can repeat is every day. So that's what it went to. But if we were to select, say, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and we turn repeats on, it can't repeat a multiple day thing every day. So it went to 1 week. So now we're doing a Monday, Wednesday, Friday option here. We can set to every other week. We could set to every month. So instead of being Monday, Wednesday, Friday, it's just the 4th, 6th, and 8th of every month. Lots of options. You set up your until time. And then in addition to that, if there are special instances where you need to either add or remove shifts without messing up the rest of the calendar, you can do so. So for example, let's say for whatever reason on the 15th, there wasn't going to be a shift. You just click it and it removes it, and it doesn't mess up the rest of the pattern, but it's no longer there. And the same vein, if there was a makeup day on the 16th, you could click it. Again, doesn't mess with the rest of the pattern. It just adds that added day. So that would get you all set up. Now, again, we could create these shifts right now. We've got all the required information, but there is still 2 more pages of things we can set up if we want to. So let's go ahead and quickly take a look at those. Preceptors. You can add preceptors to the shift. This will do 2 things, or 3 things rather. One, it shows the preceptor's name on the shift. So if a student is looking for a specific preceptor to work with, they can grab that, and they can know that from this option. It also allows you to filter by preceptors in the scheduler. And then the third thing is, if there's a preceptor selected in advance, when the students go to the PCR, I mentioned they can select a preceptor, it'll be preloaded with the assigned preceptor if there is one. Now, right now, there's no preceptors to select because there are no preceptors in that list. So where we looked at the site setup and you could add preceptors, it's another reason why you may want to set up your list of preceptors ahead of time, because you could then assign them to the schedule. I didn't in my demonstration, and I probably should have, so we could have seen that. But again, it would just be your list of preceptors that get added. And then instructors is a similar vein where it'll show the selected instructor on the shift, and it will also add them directly to the email list, which we'll talk about in just 1 second. You can assign students to these shifts. Now, often if you're creating multiple shifts, you're probably not going to want to do that, because if you did, it would add it to all 17 shifts, or all however many shifts you're making. So if you're making shifts for an entire year, it's going to add that one student to every one of those shifts. So if you are making a single shift and you want to just add them directly, awesome, go ahead and do that. But if you're making multiple, typically you're not going to want to do that, but there may be a time where you do, and you can do that. And then the sign up. So again, we had set up for the program that students are able to sign up for all types of shifts, but that's the sort of overall setting. You can still, when creating specific shifts, say, all right, for this specific shift, students can't sign up for it. We're going to assign the students. So all those settings we set up, you can always make a change to them when you're actually creating the schedule, the shift here. The one caveat to that is, if you have sign up turned off in the program settings, you cannot turn sign up on here. There'll be a warning saying that, and it'll have a link to the scheduler settings where you can make that change. But that's the one place where that program setting is going to override the other options. and then the sign-up window itself. So again, we're seeing the default sign-up window that we had. If we had made a change to it, we would see that noted here, and then we could still make changes to it anyway. So even though it's using the default, we can change it up if this one's going to be different. But there's another piece of the sign up window. That's the when can they sign up. There's also a who can sign up. So you can limit the sign up by cert level. So we could say only paramedics can sign up for this. We can limit it by student group. So we could say only students in group alpha can sign up for it. Or we can actually add a category and say only students who are paramedics in group alpha can sign up for it. So again, just different ways where you can limit who can sign up when. You can even add a second sign-up window. This is something I don't see used terribly often, but occasionally I do see it. So, for example, you might have a situation like this where the paramedics can sign up right away because we're already past the from, but maybe we don't want the rest of the students signing up until where are we? 2020 until May. So that way the paramedics would have first crack at the shifts, and then a couple days later, it would open up for the rest of the program. So again, just different options if you want to, and then if you realize you don't want that, you can just turn it off and it'll hide that. And then finally, the drop cover swap options. Again, it's using the default. We had turned them all to cannot, but if you had set it to can with permission in the default, that's what it would be here. And then again, you can always make a change to it. And then finally, and again, I apologize, we're going just a teensy bit long, but this is the last piece we'll show, and then we'll get to any questions that might be there. The notes and notifications. So notes, you can leave a note if there's something specific, if they need to, use west entrance or bring a pencil or wear scrubs, whatever you want. If there's a note that you should give them, you can leave it there. And then the email list. So I mentioned that an assigned instructor is automatically added to the email list, but you can also add others to the email list. And what that does is anytime a change is made on the shift, it will email whoever's on the email list about what that change was. So if a student signs up or a student drops or the date is changed, the time is changed, or the shift is deleted as a whole, all of those changes will be notified to anyone on the email list so that they can know what's happening. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword because it both is the most up-to-date information about these shifts. It'll let you know everything that has changed or happens on them, but it also means you're going to be notified about every change on that shift or shift series if you're creating it as a series. So there's a potential that you'll be inundated, or whoever gets put on the email list will be inundated with emails if a lot of changes happen. Again, it's all good information because it means you're keeping up to date, but also some people don't like that amount of emails coming through. So we'll go ahead and just create these shifts so you guys can see what that looks like. And now we've got in May our Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So again, coming back to the color coding, these blue shifts are field, these green ones are clinical. We can see that we added the instructor to it. If you click on the shift, you can see the note that we provided. It also has the drop cover swap options. It has the parameters of when students can sign up for it. So just everything that we need is in here, and then we can edit or delete them. And because these were created as a series, we can also edit or delete them as a series. And as you can see, what we just selected is all there. So we could remove them or make changes to them as a whole, and that's no problem at all. The last quick two things I want to point out is I had mentioned at the very beginning that you can also access the scheduler settings from the scheduler itself, and that's if you just hover over the schedule and click on settings. The shift requests, if you do turn on drop with permission, those go here. And then the PDF email, this is an option where you can actually set up a recurring email. You can also make a one-time email of this calendar or just a PDF of the calendar, but this will set up where whoever you set up to go out to will receive a PDF of the schedule either every month or every week. And so again, this is a nice balance if you want someone who's not in Fisdap to stay up to date on what's happening in the schedule, but you don't want them to be inundated with all the emails from the email list. This can be a nice balance where you send a once a week email of who's going. And just really quickly on that, to use that feature, what you would do is you would set up the schedule, the filter, how you want. So if we only wanted the Fisdap webinar site, we could select that. We could even turn available off, so only the chosen shifts are selected. Now, obviously, for that shift we just created, we didn't assign any students, so there are no chosen shifts for it. But let's say that's what we really wanted to send out every week, we could then take that and click the PDF email button. So it's going to take the view and the filter options that you have when you click it, and that's what's going to use to send out. So then we can set up our recurring email and send out to our site coordinator at that site. Obviously, for this week, they would see no one's coming. It'd be a blank schedule. But next week, they would see, if someone did sign up, they would see that when the email goes out. So again, I apologize for going a little bit long. Let's just going to go ahead and check if there are questions that have come in. I am not seeing any at the moment, but I'll give you guys just a moment here if there are any. And while that's happening, I'm going to go ahead and, my apologies. So if there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and let you go. Again, apologies about going a little bit long. If you do have questions that come up, please feel free to email either support@fisdap.net, or you can give us a call at 651-690-9241. And otherwise, the go.fisdap.net/tips and tricks, as you can see here, is where we upload all of these to our page. Oh, looks like a question did come in. Let me go ahead and grab that. Oh, it was just thank you. Well, you're very welcome. And then last thing I'll just say is we also upload these. They're hosted through YouTube. So if you ever miss one and you don't remember the fisdap.net, go.fisdap.net/tips and tricks, A, it's also in our help section. There's a link to them there. And B, you can also find our YouTube page on YouTube. And if you want to, you can go ahead and subscribe or use the notifications there, and you'll actually be notified when we upload them. So if you don't make it to this, you'll just know when we upload it up, which is usually in a day or two after these. So with that, thank you guys very much. Hope everyone's staying safe. Again, give us a call if you've got questions, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you for everyone for joining us. We'll see you next time.